I remembered something that had been told to me in a quite esoteric setting at a place called Damanhur. It's a spiritual, esoteric, but also very practical community in the north of Italy. I'd taken part in a wonderful ritual there, and I'd asked a question: what shall I do with this life? And part of the answer had the sentence, walk in circles in public places. And I had thought that was some metaphor. Years later, I suddenly thought, maybe it isn't a metaphor, maybe it's an instruction. So I thought, well, I'll try it. And I went to Leicester Square, it's a very busy square in the centre of London. And I started doing this. I started walking in a big circle. And I realised I was kind of copping out. I wasn't really, because if you walk in a huge circle, no one knows you're walking in a circle. So I started to tighten the circle. And as I started to tighten the circle, two things happened. One is that I was feeling very uncomfortable about that. And that the rule, thou shalt not walk in a circle, was in my head, no one else's. And the other thing is I needed to bother because no one could see me. Because I looked into people's eyes and they weren't looking, they were thinking. So they were on the street and I suddenly thought, I'm surrounded by people who aren't actually looking, they're just worried. A lot of them were on iPhones. And basically, it's something that I noticed in the opera world is we have a thing called snake eyes, which is when the tenor usually is supposed to be looking lovingly at Linda the soprano, but in fact is looking inwards going, uh-oh, there's a high note coming, and it just worries. So your eyes are kind of glazed, and it's the look, if you look around when you're on the street, you'll see people, and no disrespect to people, but people aren't looking, they're thinking. They're not seeing, they're thinking. And so I realized that two things, that the street could be a wonderful place to explore development and one's own limits and how one limits oneself, but also that as busy as the street is, in a funny way, it's a private space because people are not seeing what's out there. Some people do. The police are looking often, and also panhandlers or people who don't have homes and have forced to live on the streets, they watch. But that was, I think, the moment when I thought the things that we call streets and hurry through on our way to our next task are actually rich territories for exploration. I wasn't the first, by any means, of course, to do this. Anyone that knows the flaneur movement, which arose in Paris in the late 19th century, when, of course, they electrified the streets of Paris. They put electric light. And so Paris became the city of light. And it meant that at night, where previously it was just too dangerous often to go out without a burly manservant with you, everyone could go out in the streets now. And a group of poets led by Baudelaire and Apollinaire started using the streets as places to dive into the crowd and disappear and have the kind of artistic revelations that previously they would have expected in a forest or in nature. And they were the first, I think, to explore in a real way the quite magical and spiritual potential of the urban landscapes.